Welcome to Composition 2B, Approaching the Dominant. In our first lesson, we talked about how to end a musical phrase when we end up on the tonic, how to approach the tonic. Well, now we're going to add another element to our melody. It's called the dominant. In our world, the dominant is going to be the note A. A is the fifth note of the D Dorian mode, which is the mode we're going to be using. It's not uncommon in the middle of a musical phrase to have a pause somewhere in the middle, a pinnacle. And that pinnacle many times is the dominant. So we're going to be talking about how to set up this dominant to make it have a dominant sounding position in our melody. So stand by, get ready, get set, let's go. This lesson will introduce the student to approaching the dominant or cofinalis of the Dorian mode. We are going to discuss approaching the dominant, or the A, from below and from above. A common use of the dominant is to make the dominant the pinnacle or the high point of a musical phrase. This starts the phrase back to its journey to the tonic. If you will look at the above example, I show all the instances of the tonic and the dominant and their approaching notes. At the conclusion of this lesson, the student should know the following: how to approach the dominant or the cofinalis, and be able to write a musical phrase that demonstrates the two approaches to the dominant. All right, let's talk about approaching the dominant from above. First of all, when we speak of the Dorian, we're going to be using D Dorian, because that's what Dorian meant in the medieval times. In the example below, there's a phrase written in the Dorian mode. There are two instances of the dominant or cofinalis, measures 2 and 3. I've colored the dominant blue for ease of reference. In much of medieval composition, the dominant of the Dorian is not approached from a B natural, because the B natural often found itself in combination with an F, which figures prominently in this mode. An F to B is a flatted fifth or a diminished fifth, and that was considered too dissonant for use. So to fix that, they almost always used a B flat instead of a B natural, which meant that if it hit a B flat and an F, you got a perfect fourth instead of the diminished fifth, which made everything wonderful. In measure 2, we see an approach that takes advantage of this principle. An F is a second note going to a B flat down to the A. Later, when you hear this played back, you're going to hear how prominent that sets up the A. It's training your ear to know that this is an important moment coming up in this melody. Now, let's look at approaching the dominant from below. Measure 3, there's an A. We are approaching that A with a G sharp. In this case, we're approaching the dominant like we would approach a tonic. Do you remember when we said the strongest cadence was to approach the tonic from a half step below? Well, we're doing the same thing here. Whenever you approach any note from a half step below, you're drawing attention to that note. You're saying, this is a pivotal part of this melody. And in the middle of this melodic phrase, I have two A's. I approached one from a half step above, the B flat, approaching the second one from a half step below from the G sharp. I'm telling the person that's listening, this note is important. It's a beautiful and very distinctive approach. All right, there are two things that the individual is going to be doing with this class. One, hey, watch the video. You're doing that, so I think that's done. We're going to be analyzing pre-written melodies as well as writing our assignments in class. We're going to do that as a group activity because I want to be able to handle problems as they show up in class. So that's all your responsibility is going to be. Watch this video. Now, let's have a listen to our example, and I'll point out again the different cadences involved. All right, Watch how we approach the dominant from above and below, and see how that just gives that A place of prominence somewhere in the middle of our melody. Listen to it again. Also listen to how we end it, how we come in to the tonic with the C, from a C sharp. It just brings it to a final sense of rest. Wasn't that gorgeous? All right, now let's listen again without me talking. The definition of a cadence is a lot more complex than what I'm going to get into here, but for our purposes, just know that a perfect cadence is when you approach the tonic from a half step below, as you see in our example here. A half cadence is where you end up on the dominant instead of the tonic, which is what happens in measure 2 and the very beginning of measure 3. Perfect cadence, half cadence. Cool shades.